I want you guys to stand up for justice and stand up for what's right. This is not about a black and white thing. This is about a right and wrong thing.
The mother of Trayvon Martin, an unarmed 17-year-old who was shot dead last month on his way back home from a convenience store. He was carrying a bag of Skittles and an iced tea. George Zimmerman, a self-appointed neighborhood watchman, was the man who shot Trayvon, claiming self-defense. He was not arrested. Then the 911 tapes were made public.
Which entrance is that he's heading towards?
The back entrance.
Are you following him?
Yeah.
Okay, we don't need you to do that.
Those tapes gave way to more questions about what really happened that night and why Zimmerman wasn't arrested. The media gave more attention to the story, and so did the activists.
You cannot defend yourself against a pack of Skittles and iced tea. Don't talk to us like we stupid. Don't talk to us like we ignorant. We love our children like you love yours. Lock them up.
This story has built incredibly in the month or so since it happened. No doubt a tragic story. Does it deserve the attention of national media?
Well, the media have certain predilections. They're always interested in the cute child that gets murdered. They're always interested in the blonde co-ed that gets murdered. And they're interested in the black victim of racism as another thing. There are about 300 murders a week in this country, and they pick out certain ones, and then we can name them. And this case was in the tradition of sort of Emmett Till or James Byrd or Yusuf Hawkins until on Friday the President of the United States jumped in a very personal way. And it was interesting that Michael Shear of the New York Times said he seemed eager to jump into this debate, which to me would lead to a mistrial automatically for the defendant in this case, if there is one. But nonetheless, now it just guarantees this is a supernova of politics for a long time to come.
We're going to hear what the president had to say in a moment, but right now the body language from Judy next to you is saying all kinds of disagreement.
Well, this is because Jim and I discussed this story a long time ago, and that is, of course, this was a national story. This is a story that has resonance not only because an unarmed black teenager is shot down on a street. It's a story because 20 states have gun laws just like Florida. It's a story because the Florida police appear to have covered up this terrible, terrible event and the facts leading to it. Of course, the national media got onto it after it became a sensation on social media. This was a story driven by the social media.
So if she's right, did the national media fail? I mean, it took...
Well, you know, it's interesting because one of the journalism critiques that we all read talked about the fact that none of the journalists' articles talked about, and the journalists didn't do their jobs in terms of the racial composition of the community. Were there other racially motivated crimes in that community? Because they're all just talking about racism, and the history of this guy Zimmerman, and whether he, in fact, all his other calls, which he had made 30-some calls over the last 10 years to 911 or to the cops, were they actually, did they have a racial component? Nobody really looked at that, and I think that's pretty interesting.
Here's a quote you don't normally hear, Cal. Thank God for the media, because I'm not sure we ever would have gotten the truth out. That from the attorney who was representing Trayvon's parents.
This story has two components. There's the legal one, which the authorities are looking into, and then there's the media one. The Washington Post headline, this gives us a chance to go back to the 60s again, and this is what the big media want to replay over and over again. But let me suggest something else. I live in Washington, D.C. I watch the local news every night. It's true in many other big cities, too. Most of the crime stories that the local stations focus on involve African-American perpetrators, dead black children, perpetrating adults with guns, this sort of thing. You almost never see stories on local news about successful, family-oriented, honest, law-abiding African-American people. And I'm suggesting to you, John, that this helps feed the racism in some minds and gives the gated communities and the alarms more credence.
Ellen, racism figured into this coverage here very quickly. If Zimmerman were black, would this story have gotten this kind of attention?
Most likely it would not have. And the fact is that, but he wasn't. And racism did play into it. And racism does play into it. And in fact, there was one group, YourWeb, that really said that there were a lot of these kind of stories that don't get play precisely because of that.
I don't think we know right now, Ellen, that racism played into it or not.
Well,
I don't hear Zimmerman being quoted saying anything to that effect. So we should be careful about, look, this guy, Zimmerman, who may well be acquitted, who knows, he might not even get indicted, is already being convicted in the mainstream media, and just to throw around the R word, racism, is just part of the indictment process.
He said they always get away with it on the tape. He was told to stop stalking this kid, and he disregarded those instructions. It's very hard to imagine a situation in which race is not a factor here, Jim.
What about the crime rate in the area? Does that matter?
Well, I mean, that's exactly what some of the journalism sites pointed out, that they had not taken a look at it. And it's interesting. I also want to say is the press has been terrible on Zimmerman's family. We don't know any profiles of the guy. We don't know his family life.
I'm sorry. Mother Jones did a very good piece on this that has a lot of the elements that you say haven't been covered. In fact, it has been covered.
Okay, missed it.
It got a lot of attention when the president spoke out about it. Real quickly, here's what he said.
My main message is to the parents of Trayvon Martin. You know, if I had a son, he'd look like Trayvon. And, you know, I think they are right to expect that all of us as Americans are going to take this with the seriousness it deserves, and that we're going to get to the bottom of exactly what happened.
Originally, the president at the White House had said it was a matter for local authorities to sort out. Is it helpful when the president talks about individual crime?
Yeah, it's an election year. I mean, everything is colored by the election year. It reminds me, though, of the case in Boston between the Harvard professor and the Boston police officer. That was clearly a local matter. The president injected himself, had the two guys down for a beer in the backyard of the White House, and it's all about him and all about publicity and all about getting reelected.
No, the president spoke from a personal standpoint. Give the poor guy a break. Cal.
Come on.
If he'd wanted to politicize it, he would have started talking about gun control laws.
As I mentioned,
why are you speaking for them?
Michael Shear at the New York Times said, although the president is normally reluctant to get into things, probably because he feels he got burned on the Boston cop story, he wanted to get into this. So you have to at least ask whether this is political calculation. They took on Rush Limbaugh, and when Obama
that story happened in Cambridge.
If I was Mr. Zimmerman's attorney, I would be really happy with what happened today.